Hello? Am I on? Can you hear me? You can. You can. Now, who can hear me? Can you hear me at the back? Hurrah. Hello? Are you having a good day? Fantastic. Well, hopefully I can make the next hour super too. If you're standing at the sides, there are some seats right down on the front row, and there are some seats down here if you want to come and sit where it's hard to see the screen, but there's some seats over there as well. Don't be afraid. All right, well, welcome to New Ways to Visualize Time. Hopefully in the next hour, my goal in the next hour is to give you some ideas of looking at your data from different perspectives. It's actually a little bit bigger than just looking at time. It's how we approach data completely. My name is Andy Cotgreave. I'm technical evangelist at Tableau. I've been with the company 5 years, and I was a customer 4 years previous to that at the University of Oxford. So I started using Tableau at version 3.5, which didn't do very much, but it was still a kick-ass piece of software which I fell in love with. Now you can find me. I write on Computer World. I tweet a lot. They pay me to tweet, which is amazing. I've been involved in Makeover Monday, which is a big social data project this year. You may have seen that. And I wrote a book this year, the Big Book of Dashboards. I wrote with 2 Tableau Zen masters, and it's our goal for that book to be a really good reference for anybody trying to look for inspiring ideas about how to make great dashboards. We've got URLs so you can go and sign up for some early release on that. But over those 9 years, I've learned a lot about visualizing data. It's been my great privilege to work with many customers and work with our research team to learn some of the tricks behind data visualization and the science of it. I want to start off with some housekeeping. Some of you were in the previous session, so you know what's going to happen. Could everybody raise their hand? All right. Now, no. Keep it up, right? You are allowed to put your hand down if you're going to fill out the session feedback at the end of this. Right, nearly 100%. You kept your hand up in the previous session. It's, as I said before, it's really important. I do these presentations a lot, and I'm always seeking to improve, so I want to know what is good and bad. And, you know, from Tableau, we're trying to put on the best possible conference we can, and we can't improve it if we don't know which bits you're loving generally and which bits you aren't. So please, at the end of this session, if you could take the time to just open your app and fill out the feedback, that would really help me and the company. Second bit of housekeeping is everything you're going to see today is at the end of this URL, tabsoft.co/time in Tableau, and you'll see it at the bottom of most of these slides as well. So take notes if you want, take photos, but you can sit back and enjoy it and go and get the resources later. I'm on Twitter, as I say. I love the attention. It's terrible, but you can use the hashtag visualizetime, tweet me. And then the last bit, I won't do an open Q&A at the end because there's a lot of you. So if you want to stick around, if you want to ask some questions, I'll stick down at the front. Final bit of housekeeping. We're going to look at how to do some relatively, not that complicated charts in Tableau. There's certainly things that any beginner or intermediate person could do. But if you really want to go deep and look at some other really powerful ways of looking at time, I recommend these 2 sessions by Bethany Lyons, which don't obviously talk about time, but they're actually really interesting ways to visualize time in there. So it's Bethany. Just search for Bethany Lyons. She's one of our best speakers in the company. She's always entertaining. So I recommend you go and see those. But we're here to do my talk, not her talk. So today I'm going to talk about 3 things. What is time? I'm going to do only 10 minutes on that. I mean, you can do whole philosophy degrees on that. You can devote your life. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the history. I've already freaked Max out. And then what? Oh, yeah, the demo. We're going to spend most of the time in Tableau itself. So, how do you visualize time? Timeline, thank you. Actually, for the Americans in the audience, how do you visualize time? I will concede Z because I'm in Austin, Texas. The timeline, that's a brilliant answer. That's exactly the answer I wanted. We obviously, we look at time as clocks. These days, we seem to contemplate the eternity of or the shortness of our existence by watching time spin around on our phones. But my answer is it depends, which is what we're going to focus on throughout the day. Now, before I get onto that, I want to do an exercise, and I've done this only with groups of 20, so it's going to be fascinating to see what happens here. I want to think about which way is time. So, I'd like you all to, let's follow along with it. Everybody close their eyes and relax. and think about time. Think about the concept of time and where it's going, right? And then with your eyes closed, we're thinking about time. Think about where tomorrow is, right? Where is tomorrow? So what I want you all to do with your eyes closed is point to tomorrow. All right, okay, keep those pointing. That is really interesting. Okay, everybody open their eyes and just, well, keep pointing in the direction we're going. So, well done. This is amazing. Right, who pointed forwards? Yeah, who pointed upwards? Who pointed to the right? Right, isn't this amazing? Right, it's an incredible thing. Most people in a Western culture point forwards. We sort of perceive time as moving forwards, but that's not a universal standard by any means at all. Some cultures point backwards. Some answer the question by asking what time of day it is, which is a really incredible concept. And a lot of people point to the right, maybe because that's the way we look at line charts. But I find it fascinating, this concept that we point forwards, and yet we draw data. We don't draw it forwards because most of our work is two-dimensional. But there are some great examples of forward-based visualizations, which I will attempt to bring on the screen. Let's do it this way rather than... Right, so this is from the Wall Street Journal, and this is a timeline showing the NASDAQ over time, and this is designed to be looked at with a Google Cardboard. And we're going to go on a journey of the roller coaster of the NASDAQ, right? And off we go. We're going forwards in time. We're going to hit that roller coaster as we go. And this stuff's really interesting, and it's quite intriguing. It's an interesting way to look at the data, but it's not really very practical, is it? It's very time-consuming, and it's a bit of a technical navel gaze exploration, I think. But it's pretty cool. Here we go. Are you ready to go down the roller coaster? Boom! And what's great is you can look at I can look around. So if you're looking at this with an eye tracker, you can face the doom. So that's pretty awesome. Here's another one. This is another way of looking at time. We can scroll down. One of the things I'm seeing a lot in visualization is people are putting time on the y-axis. So this is from Information is Beautiful, and it shows, each circle shows a data breach, and the bigger the circle, the more records got leaked. And what's interesting about this is it's a vertical axis. So as we're going down, we're going back in time. So the most recent is at the top. We can see, wow, what is that? What's that massive one? Well, anyway, Heartland, massive data breach. And then here's another one. This, some of you may have seen this. This is from XKCD, fantastic webcomic. And this actually won the Best Visualization Gold Award at the Information is Beautiful Awards last week. And what it shows is the global average temperature over time. And again, this is a vertical time axis. And what the guy did here is that the dotted line shows the average global temperature over 20,000 years. So we start at the top, and we go down, we have a bit of a history lesson, and you can just see that line sort of creeping and creeping. And then as we get to the bottom, we get to the 21st century, and wham, look at it, shoot off to the right. This is a vertical timeline, and it is not our normal, or is it our normal way of representing time? I show this because, I'll come on to the left, right in a moment, but we are seeing a transition in the way we consume information. We now scroll. This is what we do, right? We're going to evolve these powerful thumbs. But that's how we consume data. And if you're scrolling, you're actually creating a sequential experience via scrolling. And so who's to say that we might mentally start to switch to vertical y-axes for time as a norm? We're not there yet, but we're certainly seeing a lot more out in the field, and I see that people doing that in Tableau too. But for most of us, this is, as the gentleman said here, how we visualize time. Angle and position is a really good way of looking at data. You can see the peaks and the troughs and the trends, and that's fantastic. But as we're going to see, the trend line, while really, really good, is flawed because it hides many, many stories. So how are we here? We kind of seem to be constrained in our thoughts sometimes, going, we have time data, therefore I'll do a line chart. And the thing I want to get across to you is that constraint is something we should bust apart. We should be exploring different ways to look at time data to see lots of different stories. Now, it could be we're in this kind of bubble, slightly affected by the history of timelines. I'll just give you a quick introduction of who invented the timeline. I'm going to start in 1753 with this amazing visualization, right? So a guy called Jacques Barbe-Dubourg had data on the birth date of 2,000 famous people, or people of merit from the entirety of human history. And he wanted to create a visualization which showed when these people were born to kind of give the audience a sweep of humanity, of human history. And look at the top. He put an x-axis showing time. This is the first time somebody thought to use an x-axis to show time. What a revolution. We don't even think twice when we drag a time pill onto a shelf in Tableau. It just does it. But somebody came up with this idea, and it was him. He had a problem, though. He didn't think about scaling the x-axis. And the chart he made was 54 foot long, which is probably from here to the back of the room. So he actually had to come up with an incredible innovation, which is this. He housed it in this wooden mechanical scroller. So we do this, and we scroll, but he implemented that in 1753. So this is kind of like the first iPad vertical scrolling window. And it went horizontally, but when you look at the literature of what he was trying to do here, he talked about columns, not rows. And so some scholars are looking at that thinking, well, it was just almost by chance. He might have gone vertically, but he went horizontally, and it might have been that decision that got us there where we are today. So this is in Princeton. There's only a couple of these left in the world, we believe, but it's pretty awesome. So Barbe-Dubourg, he inspired Joseph Priestley, another incredible person, a polymath who invented many cool things and was a revolution. But he created this in 1765, which is the chart of biography. And it's the same kind of thing. Each one of those marks represents the birth and death, so he had more data, of a person of merit. Priestley's innovation was to think, well, 54 feet is pretty long for a visualization. Why don't I scale the axis down to fit my available piece of paper? Somebody had to do that first. Isn't that amazing? And then he came up with a second innovation, was that, well, I've got time on the x-axis, and I'll draw a bar for the birth and death of each individual on this chart. So he actually invented the Gantt chart 200 years before Gantt invented the Gantt chart. So good job, Priestley. But this is really cool. Again, the horizontal grouping here is different types of people, like warriors and politicians, artists and the like. And again, his goal was, over one sweep of the eye, to tell a story about the development of human history. No small ambition. Well succeeded. This was reprinted thousands of times. So that's 1765. And that inspired this chart from 1786, which some of you may know. This was by William Playfair, and it was published in 1786, and it's credited as the first statistical line chart of all time. And it shows imports between England and Denmark and Norway compared to England. But that looks like a chart we'd build in Tableau. You know, it's got a nice x-axis, good tick marks, good annotations, nice use of color. It's a really good piece of work. And clearly, that has influenced where we are today. So much so that, in fact, they've all influenced where we are today, but the Playfair one, oh, I hid that slide. That's a shame. Oh, well, you'll just have to admit it. Oh, no, I'm going to show that slide because it's awesome. Just bear with me. So much so that this is a chart that was in the FT last October. And it was done by a guy called Chris Campbell, and it shows an export imbalance between China and Europe. And, wow, it's Playfair's chart. I got in touch with Chris Campbell, who designed this, and I was like, was that deliberate? And he was like, yes, it was. So I just think it's brilliant that, you know, there are designers out in data journalism who are doing these subtle references back to some really important stuff. All right, so they pioneered where we are today, and now we are doing the timeline. So is the timeline the best? It depends. That is my mantra, right? Say that, and you sound like an expert. You can even print it on a T-shirt if you really want, right? It depends. And now I'm going to prove it for the next 45 minutes in Tableau. So who wants to see some data exploration? All right, yes, let's do it. Right, so let's get into Tableau. For those at the back, I'm going to attempt to zoom in as often as I can to show you, so you guys can see some of the detail of what I'm showing. So I'll do my best to help you guys at the back too. Right, new ways to visualize time. We're going to do 6 or 7 different charts, each of which will start with a timeline, and then I'll prove that the timeline was not the best way to show the data. That is my goal. No small ambition. Here we go. So this data set is city bike data, the cycle share scheme in New York. And it's a timeline showing journeys per month from July to August 2014 for the top 8 stations, so the 8 busiest stations. And the timeline's great because you can see that seasonal trough. Nobody rides a bike in January because it's too windy and cold. But then in the summer, everyone's back on their bikes. But if you look at the top question, it says, how has the 8 stations of traffic changed since the start of the scheme? So here we have a question where everything in the middle is irrelevant. I just want to know what happened at the start and what happened at the end. And all that stuff in the middle is distraction. So in Tableau, we can create, well, in any tool actually, but in Tableau, I will create what's called a slope chart. The first way, an easy way to do that is just grab all the data marks that are in the middle that are not the start and the end and exclude them. Now, something has become obvious, which was not obvious on the line chart. This station went from being the most popular in the first month to the least, or the 8th most popular in at the end of the data set. You couldn't see that in the line chart. And I'll even undo it and leave the highlight on. It's still not obvious. So if your question involves, if you're interested in the start and the end of your data set, just get rid of all the stuff in the middle because it's distracting. And this is what's called a slope chart. So what I did there was a very ad hoc way of doing a slope chart. You just grab the marks and exclude them. But you can make these dynamic as well. So here's the same data, but there's a filter up at the top. And as I change the filter, the slope chart changes to show whatever date range I've selected. And you can build these so as new data comes into your dashboard, it will show the start and end very, very quickly. I won't go into too much detail, but because there's a blog post about this in my URL, but it involves a table calculation saying first or last. And what that does for every mark is say, is this data point the start of the time series or the end? That's true or false. And then you can hide all the ones that are in the middle. And again, I've written a blog post about that. Slope chart, good for showing start and end. Number 2 is going to be a cycle plot. These are really cool ways of looking at seasonality or trend or repeated trends in your data. So here's city bike data again, and we've got what do the hours of 8 to 9 a.m. and noon to 1 p.m. look like. So my starting timeline here is each day of the week, journeys by hour through that day of the week. And you can see Sundays are not like Mondays. Mondays, they have this commuting peak. But I want to compare 8 a.m. on each day. What does 8 a.m. look like on each day? So 8 a.m. looks like that on a Monday. I can kind of guess that's the same on Tuesday. But where's 8 a.m. on here? It's not there. It's not here. There it is, down there. Right, that's a cognitively difficult task, or it's a difficult task to achieve on a timeline. One thing we can do with Tableau is just get rid of weekday. So I'm just going to take weekday and remove it. And now we have journeys broken down by every hour of the day. And you can see the 8 a.m. peak, but because you've all just seen what happens on Sundays, you know that's not really the truth of the data. So this isn't a great way of doing things. Instead, what we can build is what's called a cycle plot. So by default, you have the big time slice, in this case day, and the smaller time slice hour. But in Tableau, you can build a cycle plot by swapping those around. So you have the smaller time dimension hour, and then break it down by weekday. And it's as easy as doing this. Drag and drop. Now, I have something that's pretty cool. Here's 8 a.m., and here's noon. And they've got 2 very distinct shapes. So what the line shows is, in the hours of 8 a.m., how many journeys are there for each day of the week? So what do you think happens in New York throughout the week? On a Sunday, no one's riding a bike at 8 a.m. Then most people are getting up and commuting at 8 a.m. on a Monday, but not everybody. By Tuesday, everyone's up and about and riding, and then the weekend starts a bit early. We see a drop-off on Thursday, a drop-off on Friday, and then nobody's riding a bike at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. At noon, at 12 o'clock, at midday, we see the opposite. We see the peaks on Sunday and Saturday, so that's probably a time for leisure riding. So you're seeing these really distinct shapes, which are not apparent in a standard timeline. So this is called a cycle plot. It's very powerful. One of the downsides of a cycle plot is they have to be quite wide, and you don't always have that real estate on a dashboard, but they're good as part of the analytical exploration process. One way around that is to draw a line for each weekday. So I'm just going to take the weekday dimension and drop it on the color shelf. And now you've got a chart which you can make very narrow and still see the insight out of here. So each line represents a day of the week, and the x-axis is hours of the day. And the difference between weekends and weekdays now pops out very, very clearly. So this is a cycle plot. And again, we've got blog posts on how to build these and a bit more details. So there's finished. You can also do area charts with cycle plots. And I have to say, the only reason I show you this is because I built this and I thought, God, it looks like Batman. And who says Batman charts aren't valid ways of visualizing data? I certainly don't. Right. Now, oh gosh, now I've got a complete bad segue. I'm going to go to talk about fatalities. I'm sorry, everybody. Right, so this is a different data set. The reason I've changed the data set will become apparent in a moment. This is a timeline showing fatalities on roads in the US, 1975 to 2011. And the line chart's really powerful. You can see the worst year for deaths was 1980. 41,000 people died on the roads in this country then, followed by a big drop, then a plateau, then another big drop, and then finally this big trough in 2009. Now, I actually haven't gone back and looked at this, but I think airbags and seatbelts were responsible, I believe, for the first two drops. And I suspect the 2009 drop is a proxy for the economic crash of 2008. You know, there were fewer jobs, there were fewer journeys, there was less freight being moved around the States. So the timeline's showing something really interesting. But at the title, I want to look for these seasonal trends again. And a moment ago, I just said a cycle plot is a good way to look for trends. So let's build the same cycle plot, but for these fatalities. So I'm going to break down year by clicking the plus button, then go to month. So I've now got fatalities for every year and every month, and then I put year on the right-hand side of month to build a cycle plot. Now, the thing I think when I build this is, aesthetically, that chart is just really hard to read. When I built the cycle plot in with the city bike data, it conveniently has a really nice shape. When I build but the highlight table chart, this is exactly the same structure. It's small time period, big time period, and sum of whatever, and the measure on the y-axis. But aesthetically, that's just not as easy to interpret, and that's because of the shape of the data itself. And this is one of the big challenges when you're visualizing any data, whether it's time or whatever you want to visualize, is I could say to you a trend line is a good way to visualize data, but it could be that the data itself actually requires you to visualize things in a different way in order to tease out the stories. Because I don't think that scatterplot works because of the troughs and the drops that we saw. So we're going to come up with a different way of doing this. And in this example, my third example is a highlight table, which is a really good way of looking at trends like in the same way a cycle plot is. So in order to do this, along the top, we're going to have columns representing one time dimension, and down the rows, we're going to have columns representing another time dimension. This isn't very interesting because there's not much to see there. So I'm going to take the fatalities off the rows. When you put a green continuous pill on columns or rows, that means Tableau will draw an axis of something, which is not what I want here. I want Tableau to draw a matrix and color it. So I'm going to put fatalities on the color shelf, boom, and everything changes. Let me undo that, so green pills on a column or row shelf draw an axis. But if I take it off, Tableau doesn't draw an axis, but instead it draws cells in which we can put information. Now we've got something pretty interesting here. We can see each cell represents fatalities in a given month. We've got months along the top and years down the side. But what we can see now is that while 1980 was the year in which there were the most deaths on roads in the US, in 1981 there were fewer deaths, but it sort of pops out that there were more deaths throughout every single month. So we can see there were actually more deaths in January and February in 1981 than the previous year. So already things are beginning to be apparent that we couldn't see a moment ago. One great thing with highlight tables is you can choose any two time aggregations. So at the moment I've got month and year, but I could break this down and show it by calendar day. I could draw a cell for every calendar day. So to do that, I'm going to change the time dimension. So I just right-click on the year field, and in this case I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose day. Oh, why? Can anyone see that yellow? No, it's not too bad. So I'm going to choose day. Let's do that. Right-click, choose day. I'm going to change the color spread for this. So now each cell represents a day in the year, and the color represents the number of fatalities on the roads in that day over the entire time period. And something pretty horrible pops out here. January the 1st, July the 4th, and Christmas Eve, the Christmas period are the most dangerous periods on the roads. Now that could be because there's more traffic. It probably is because there's more traffic. But in terms of raw numbers, this highlight table really highlights, this awful tragedy, really. But it's a great way to look for those seasonal trends. Another thing about highlight tables is many of us might be trying to bring a data-driven culture across our organization. And does anybody here have the problem where they make the chart and then the person says, "Can I just see the table?" Yeah. All right. Keep fighting the good fight. Here's a tip. Right. Okay, I will give you the table. But you know what? I could color the table in. So I'm going to duplicate the fatalities. I'm going to use it on color and color and text, and I'm going to use it as a square. All right. I'm just undo that again. Show you what I did. I'm going to take fatalities, duplicate it. So press Control and copy it, and set it to a square. Again, this is all blogged, so you can go and find out more later. And now I've got the actual number of fatalities there as the table. And this is, for a lot of customers we've seen, this is sort of one step towards convincing people that a bit of visualization, a bit of visual indications of what is good or bad can help them. So that could be a way to sort of change that culture. So there we go. That's the highlight table finished. Now I'll do another aspect of it. So here's a different data set. I probably should have changed the color to make it apparent it's different. All right, here's another highlight table. This one shows drought index in America. I don't know why I choose miserable data sets. I should probably find happier ones. So this is a highlight table. Each cell represents a month in a year. So I've got month across the top, years down the bottom. And we can see 2012 was an extremely bad month for drought across the US. The redder, the more severe the drought was. 2010 looks pretty good. 2005, not so much drought. All right. So I just said highlight tables are good, but we can go even further. Our eyes and our brains are incredibly powerful, and you can sort of say, well, that square, that cell, can contain loads of information. I could draw an entire chart in that cell. We could put timelines in there, bar charts, scatter plots, or even maps. So what I'm going to do is replace the cell and put a map in there of the lower 48 states. To do that, I need to put latitude on the right shelf. Does anybody else drag and drop latitude onto a shelf and always put it on the wrong shelf first? Yeah. All right. I've done it many times. I think it's rows. Longitude on the columns. Longitude on the columns. And let's draw detail by state. Boom. And now, yeah, it's cool, right? And here's one I created earlier, which is a little bit bigger. This is awesome, right? I don't take credit for this. We the New York Times created a version of this with the entire 130-year span of this data set. We downloaded the data, and it's just an easy chart to build in Tableau. But the point is, I'm now seeing something really interesting about temporal and geographical data, which a timeline couldn't even hope to, but probably couldn't show as powerfully as this. 2012 was a really bad year for drought, as the highlight table showed us. But you can see actually Washington, where Tableau's from, so in the top left, it wasn't too bad. It was the other states where the drought was really severe. But we're now seeing much more contextual detail. 2010 was a good year for the US in terms of drought. There wasn't much severe drought at all. But you can see at the start of the year, if I just highlight that, oh, it takes ages. At the start of the year, oh, it doesn't highlight at all. At the start of the year, the northwest US was suffering from drought, and then towards the end of the year, it was the southeastern states which were suffering from drought. We can also do cool things like click on Texas, and interactivity gives us the chance to see any single state within the context of all of the 48 states over these time periods. And it's just a really powerful way to explore with your data. You know, you may not publish that to a dashboard, but it could be a really good part of your exploration, and it shows some really cool stuff. So the point there is, highlight tables are great, but we can pack loads of information inside those cells, which might reveal different trends over time as well. Now, you've noticed I'm switching data sets, and that's a very conscious decision, because you might be asking, well, Andy, why did you not do a highlight table of the fatalities data set? Oh, sorry, a small multiple map of the fatalities data set. And I'll show you why. So this is total fatalities by each state in the lower 48 states. And you can see California, Texas, and Florida are where most people die. And if we do a small multiple map by year and month, so we draw the same chart we just did with the drought, and I'll just drag and drop year and month. Here's one that I made earlier. That tells me nothing. It's the same every month, right? Just because you have geographical data, it doesn't mean there's any interesting geographical trends. Just because you have time data, there might not even be any interesting time trends. The point of what we're trying to build in Tableau is a tool that allows you to see all of these different iterations and types of time or types of charts very, very quickly, so that you can tease out the best articulation of your data to share to your colleagues with the dashboards you produce. Ooh, it's break time. Right. So in a moment, we're going to go on to a couple more which require table calculations. So it's going to get a bit more complicated in a moment. But first, I will show you a little video of some of the creative ways people do this on Tableau Public. Tableau Public, for those of you who aren't familiar, is one of our cloud-hosted services. It's free, and it allows you to share workbooks to the world. And there we see this incredible resource of creativity, people doing really cool stuff, sharing good ideas, and thinking about different ways of showing data. So what I did was take 10 examples from Visit the Day this year. This goes a bit quick. I should have edited this a bit slower, but here's some of the ways you can visualize time. I'll try and narrate them. So we've got bump charts. I'll talk about those in a moment. That was by Matt Chambers. Connected scatter plots, out of the scope of this talk, but good ways of doing things. Gantt charts showing the history of wrestlers, WWF. More bump charts. Again, lots of color. Highlight tables, really nice use of color, showing climate change over the last year. God, these are fast. Index charts. Andrew Beers stole my thunder this morning. I'll show you how to build those. Animations, showing Clinton v. Trump. Jump plots, which are pretty innovative new ways of doing things. Or you could just throw loads of timelines on a chart. Highlight tables, lines. Stack bars. This one was shown in the keynote this morning. It's by Ramon Martinez. This is a sequential bar chart. Gosh, that was fast, wasn't it? Yeah, I do apologize. When I built this video, it all went a bit quick. It's all a bit quick. I'm just going to stop that one. A musical stave time plot. I mean, what? Who knows? Each one of these dots represents time in a sequence, and somebody just had that creative idea of making it look like music, because that's what it's about. It's about film scores. So you should just I mean, of course, there are lots of timelines on Tableau Public, because that's a great way of showing data. All right, so the goal there is, take one thing away. Go and visit Tableau Public. Look at Visit of the Week, which always appears on your, it's on the right-hand side of Tableau desktop. It's a great way to go and look at creative ways of thinking about time and just coming up with cool ideas. So, boom, yeah, lots of different ones. All right, here we go. Going to do a slightly different one. Now, in this morning keynote, Andrew Beers stole my thunder, because I'm now going to show you the slow way of building that index chart that he built with the box office data. So until that feature is released, this is the way you do it. So I'm sort of praying the devs are really slow on that feature. All right, how do you visualize growth of things that start at different times? This is a chart showing views per week of the 10 most popular YouTube videos of all time. So we have Gangnam Style, an early pioneer of completely viral music. Did anybody in this room not see Gangnam Style? Right. Did anybody not watch it about 10 times? I watched it 10 times. I don't know. Yeah. But now look, nobody watches it. Oh, a mere 3 million views per week. Who is still watching that? But then look at this, 2016, Hello by Adele. Boom. Can you imagine that's some weird tooltip thing. Anyways, 325 million views in, was it three? Yeah, no, 130 million views in its second week of release. That is just bananas. And then we've got other classics, such as Blank Space by Taylor Swift. There's one by Justin Bieber, but is it Sorry? Is anybody? Sorry by Justin Bieber? Yeah, all right, okay, there it is. A minnow compared to Adele, thank God. All right, but my question here is, which one of these hit 1 billion views first? Because this is the billion view club. And the timeline, this timeline's really good. We can see that Gangnam Style was successful a while ago. We can see that Adele had the highest weekly count, and that was more recent. Really good chart. But it doesn't answer that question, which one hit 1 billion views first? So let's build that chart. So here we go. So there's a bit of table calculations here. Just hold on, we'll be there. It's pretty straightforward. The first thing we need to do is build a running total. So right-click on the measure, choose Quick Table Calculation, and choose Running Total. Ooh, and already we're seeing something pretty cool. We can see Gangnam Style is still streets ahead of everybody else. And we can begin to compare these different lines. You can see Hello was steep, so is Gangnam Style. These have got steep lines. Lots of people looked at those things first. But what we want to do is collapse each line so that it starts at the same place. So in order to do that, first thing I need to do is turn this ad hoc calculation into a permanent calculation. For those of you who don't know how to do that. So to create the running total, I just right-clicked. Tableau shows this little delta symbol. That's an indication that this is a table calculation rather than a default aggregation. So that's an ad hoc calculation, but if I want to keep that and use it later, I could drag and drop that ad hoc calculation to my data window, drop, and then I get this little prompt, so I'll call it running total TC16. And I've now added a calculation to my data model, right? So that's just a nice little way to explore the data in an ad hoc way, and if something comes out you want to keep, just drag it to the data window and you are good to go. And that needs to compute using date. Right, the next thing we need to do, at the moment Tableau is drawing an axis, or drawing an x-axis showing weeks, but I want it to show an index of weeks since that thing was released. So what I need to do there is put week on the details shelf, because we're going to need it, convert it to exact date. Again, I'm not going to step through all the reasons why, and discrete. So what I've done here now is date is now, the exact date is now on this viz as a piece of detail. That means we can refer to it in table calculations. And to create an index, I double-click and write the word index, because that's a table calculation we have in Tableau. So index just says, for the partition of the data, just number it from 1 to the end of that partition. Nearly there, and then we need to say, well, compute that using the dates within the data. And here we go. Check it out. Right, so now I'll just add a constant line. Running totals, 1 billion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you probably already knew it. It turns out hello was the fastest growing YouTube video of all time. It took a mere 85 days, 87, or maybe 87 days, for 1 billion people to watch that video. That's amazing. Has anybody not seen it? I've actually not watched it. No? All right. So maybe we can go and watch it later. But this is a really brilliant chart. And it's a brilliant chart, so therefore it's a good reason we're going to make it a lot easier than that to build. Because think about all the things you do in your businesses. You know, if you're releasing products at different times, you might want to know, well, which one was the fastest grower? And you can see some cool things. This one's called Recipe for Disaster, and that's a Russian cartoon. It's a very, I actually don't really know much about it, but it's a Russian animation series, which was a real slow burner. And then suddenly it's got to this 1 billion views more recently. And what's this one? Bailando by Enrique Iglesias. You know, he was kind of in the middle, right? But it's Gangnam Style. Oh, Justin Bieber actually, no, oops. See, Justin Bieber, he was the second fastest to get to 1 billion views. Bless him. Well, my kids love Justin Bieber, so I actually hear it an awful lot now. But index charts, awesome. Bit of table calculations will get a lot easier when we release the feature coming soon. All right, how am I doing for time? I'm not doing too badly. Let's talk about animation. I'm actually going to talk about politics, which is slightly dodgy. But anyway, we have a page shelf in Tableau, which is a really cool way of animating data. We currently can't animate on Tableau server, which is a bit of a shame. But if you're doing exploration, it's a really interesting way of looking at data. So what I have here is polling data for the US election since April from dailycost.com. And what I've currently done is, so the y-axis shows the difference between Clinton and Trump in the polling data, right? So it's, it's just the difference. So over here on this side, we've got West Virginia. If it's down, that's heavily swinging towards Trump. And at the other end, we've got Hawaii, heavily swinging towards Clinton. There's 2 outliers I've excluded because they really, really skew the data. All right, so that's the average polling data for the entire duration of my data set. But I can do some cool things. So I'm going to right-click on date and drop date onto my details shelf and select MDY. So that's going to draw a mark for every day that we have polling data for in the data set. So click OK. Well, now we get these kind of lozenges. What's happening here is there's lots of marks all in the same straight line, which is cool. You can see some aspects, so whatever this state, Alaska has got quite a short lozenge, so I guess Alaska hasn't moved as much as Missouri, so that's good. But what if I want to see all the dots in each pane of data? Well, I'm going to create what's called a jitter plot, and again, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but a jitter plot is a really cool way of saying, well, instead of drawing everything in a straight line, just kind of spread it around a little bit randomly. And to do that, there's a secret function, unsupported, in Tableau called random. So don't tell anybody. But it's brilliant. What's going to happen when I press enter here is it's going to create a random number. And because it's a measure, it's going to draw an axis. And all those dots are going to magically appear. Here we go, 1, 2, 3, magic. All right? But they're now a bit big, so I'll make them smaller. And I'll hide that header. All right. Ooh, now we're seeing lots of detail, right? We're getting into the detail, and we can see so each dot represents the polling position on a given day. And what was I going to do next? Oh yes, animate the thing. Now I'm going to drag and replicate the month, day, year on the page shelf. So here we go, month, day, year on the page shelf. And now I get this page animation. I can click the speed, and I can press play, and we can play. But I'm actually going to jump one step and show you the finished one, because I added a little Clinton and Trump face. So remember, down below is more swinging towards Trump. Up above is more swinging towards Clinton. And we can see what happens over time. So the black bar represents the average, the most recent, or the polling date for that day that we're in. And you believe me, when I built this viz for Makeover Monday, I actually learned something new because I'd always assumed that different states would swing at different rates. But you can see as things go up in favor of both candidates, actually, I guess if something happens in the news, all states kind of swing largely together. And I, as a non-American, not quite understanding your American politics, I thought it would be a little bit different. But there you go, that was animation. Do you want to see it again? So you can see, look, ooh, this is the pulse of what you guys have experienced for the last eternity. Don't tell my bosses I even mentioned politics. All right. All right, and I'm not going to show you how to build this one. This one's a bump chart. So a bump chart is really good if you want to show rank, right? Was something first, second, third, or whatever. If the actual value is not relevant, then show a bump chart. Bump charts were named after a particular way of racing boats in Oxford, because we race along the river in Oxford where I live, and the college boats have to literally try and bump the other boats to get ahead of them. Crazy. Been going for hundreds of years. But I'll show you the bump chart. This is a scoreboard I created for my school village pub quiz trivia night last year, and I've highlighted two teams. Blue is the teachers, who are very competitive and always want to win. And I'm going to animate round by round what happened to the scores. So here we go. So Andy's, no, press the right button, press play. And what you can see is changes in rank over time. The Magnificent Seven plummeted, and Andy's teachers, look, they just sort of went from being first to nearly the bottom, which gave all the parents much joy. Because our principal is an extremely competitive guy. So that was quite funny. But the bump chart is a really good way if you want to show changes in rank, not the actual value, like this. You know, if you're selling things, it's like, well, which was the most popular product over time? Bump charts are really good ways of doing it. And for this, you do need, there's 2 or 3 table calculations you need to write. Again, blog that on the URL I'll share in a moment. But a really nice way of showing rank rather than raw value. Oops. All right, where are we up to? So, hey, we explored some data. All right, so let's wrap up. What I've shown you is, I think that was maybe 7 or 8 different ways of visualizing time. I hope, or actually, I'll ask you, did you see things in the non-timelines that the timelines didn't show you? Yay. Thank you. Do put in the feedback at the end that if you want to say you didn't learn anything, please tell me. But hopefully you did. So I've got 3 actions to go and find some more to help improve. So next time you are exploring data, just escape out of that time is a trend line paradigm. You know, just drag and drop things around. You can't break data. Just put the time dimensions in different places, and it'll be amazing what kind of charts pop out. Secondly, think about other people's charts. One of the great things that exist in our Tableau community is there's a really healthy attitude of constructive criticism. You know, it's okay to look at all these charts and think, oh, I didn't like that one, or I did like that one. And take that moment to step back and don't just assume a chart is great, and don't have the sense of feeling that it's your fault if you can't understand a chart, because it's probably not. So, you know, think about this and be a bit more critical. Constructively. But then go and check out my resource page. It's time in Tableau. I've got links to all this historical stuff, links to blog posts explaining how to build each of these charts, and hopefully from that you'll learn a lot more. So, conference, that's a brief 45-minute session. I hope I've given you some inspiration. Go check this stuff out, ask me questions, but otherwise, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Oh. And please do fill out the survey. You all put your hands down. Thank you.